And ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Aaron's?
Here.
Camera?
Here.
Carbonaro?
Here.
Daney?
Here.
Hopkins?
Here.
Ranky?
Here.
President Wallace.
Here. Our items this evening, under the first item we have is Planning and Zoning Committee for Chairman Ranky.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have one item. It's the 2250 to 2260 Southwind Boulevard for discussion and then forwarding to the Plan Commission. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, Trustee Ranky. This is property that's located on the far west end of the village at the southeast corner of Route 25 and West Bartlett Road. And as you know, this is an area that we're starting to see some development occurred after a long time. But this particular development proposal is an outside storage yard for the first building that was built out there, which is Bluff City Materials headquarters in Abbott Land and Development. Just for your frame of reference, this SR4 property this is an older air photo. This is the site of the Bartlett Point West subdivision, and now if you had an updated air photo, there's about 8 houses being built here.
First Kane County resident.
First Kane County residents, right? Thank you, Mayor. And essentially, it's a pretty simple, this is not a great drawing, but it's a pretty simple office building and outside storage area for Benchmark Construction. This one might highlight it a little better. Benchmark occupies the basement of the office building and would like to use this for their equipment storage. Benchmark is a large construction of storm and underground piping operations. They previously had equipment all over in our western area of the village and on other sites, and they want to consolidate it all here. They'll do landscaping. There will be a fence up, and the storage area will be enclosed with some berming and also stormwater detentions required. That's it. If you have any questions, I will answer those or try to, but it's ready to go on to Plan Commission.
Any questions or concerns from the board?
Will most of all this be screened from the new Kane County residents that we have?
That was a concern of the staff and also of the building owner, and I don't know which one shows it better, but this is a fence detail, and it will go along the perimeter of the berm. This is a bermed area. You can kind of see the cross section of the berm down here. It's about 4 or 5 feet tall. Fence will be on top of it, and then tall evergreen trees or shrubs. I think we wanted 8 feet minimum, Dean, is that correct? And they'll go along that perimeter. Our arborist has looked at it, and we have. That's the screening that will take place that will prevent most of the people from seeing it.
So how big equipment are we talking about? Or is it equipment, or what are we talking about putting on it?
Dean can answer that. He's most familiar with Benchmark, and he can tell you the layout of the park, too.
Right. Thank you. Dean Kelly, Abbott Land. And, yeah, this is our office building and our park, so we want it to look nice and also be functional for Benchmark, which is one of the major tenants and owners of the building. So, yeah, Jim mentioned how it'll be screened. Of note, there's a berm on the north end, but it's really kind of a natural grade. Elevation is higher than where the building sits and certainly where the storage area is. When you come down Southwind Boulevard going to the east, it actually goes down the hill. And so Jim mentioned it was the basement. It's really the lower level. It comes out at grade at that point. The equipment is, and the reason they need it, you know, they may repair a truck or a backhoe occasionally. They do it inside the building. That's where their shop is. So they'll have it sitting in the yard. They'll bring it in. They'll repair it. And then most of the times it's out on a job site. And they'll have some miscellaneous equipment. They still maintain other yards for other equipment that they have, but for their shop, it's very convenient to have it right there. And on top of the screening that Jim outlined, there'll be another building to the east. And there's actually a little bit extra property. That's 5 acres where our building is, and we take up about 4.2. So when we go to develop the site next to it, we'll consolidate that extra 0.8 acres That turns that lot into about 3.5 or 4 acres, and there'll be a building that will also serve to screen the use. And then, of course, we'll have other buildings to the north.
Storing machinery like this close to a residential area, is there going to be noise emitted from this facility?
They'll repair it and then they'll leave. They don't really, there's no need for them to turn it on outside necessarily. And we're obviously aware of that. We're developing the houses, so.
So is this property that will be developed, I guess you're talking about where it says Benchmark Lane, is that more professional buildings or is that residential? That's
Yeah, that'll all be commercial.
commercial building?
You're going to see, probably in a few months, we're going to bring in, we have a gas station use on the corner.
Right.
We're working with them and with Kane County right now on some access off of West Bartlett, or right in, right out. That'll be on the corner. That'll take up about half of there's about 6.5 acres north of Benchmark Lane. So there'll be another 3.5 acres roughly that will be developed, probably into something more of a transitional use between the gas station and the residence. And then south of Benchmark Lane and kind of the L-shaped parcel, I see other kind of transitional uses. I don't see a lot of heavy retail or commercial, just because there aren't enough rooftops to support it. So I could see, a medical office type thing, light industrial, or.
How about a Country Donuts?
Pardon me?
Country Donuts.
Yeah. Right.
Well, that's my one concern is that, I'm looking at that thinking it's a fairly prominent corner. If it comes down to having light industrial type buildings in that area, we want it to look nice, and then we basically have a yard where you're kind of dumping things. Equipment and stuff. And I've seen a lot of yards where the equipment gets dumped, and that's what it is. It's just a place to dump equipment, and it doesn't look good. I mean, it looks kind of. Well, I won't use other words, but it looks bad.
I know what you mean, but yeah. Well, that is screened very heavily. We have the berm, we have the solid fence, which would be a nice looking fence, and then we have the landscaping. And over time, you won't be able to see it. The only way you'll see it is if you happen to drive by and look at it. You might see into there a little bit, but it's very well hidden, based on the grade and then the berm and then the fence. And again, we have a vested interest in creating a nice park that's inviting to everybody. So,
Right.
and again, it's kind of it's really bring a piece of equipment in, they go work on it outside. Maybe it sits out there for a little bit. They take it out. So it's not a heavy yard. It's not in and out all the time. They do have other yards where they store a lot of equipment. They actually have a yard next to Bluff City Industrial Park. It's about 2.5 acres, and that's where they store unsightly equipment, if you want to characterize it that way. So,
I mean, and off the beaten path, if that's what they're going to do with it, I'm good with that. But right on a corner, I just wanted to make sure that it's not going to be an eyesore. People are going to see right in there that intersection. It becomes an eyesore, even though it's your own vested interest.
Right. Yeah, and we feel very comfortable. It's going to look very good. So,
and if you're familiar with that area, if you're driving down 25, you can't see behind the building even, because the building sits down here and 25 is up here.
Well, especially when you add the fence and the landscaping to it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate you doing the berm and the fence.
Yeah.
That will, I think, go a long way for the residents over there, the future residents.
Anything else? All right, so then unless there's objections, we'll look forward to the sign of the Plan Commission.
That'll work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. President, that's all we have for planning and zoning this evening.
Thank you, Chairman Ranke. Final item for our Committee of the Whole meeting this evening is under the Public Works Committee. That would be for Chairman Kammer.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening we have the water and sewer funds rates, and we're talking about an increase in rates. Once again, maybe the easiest thing to do would be to turn this over to staff, let Dan or Paula make some comments about this.
Dan, start. You're going to start.
I drew the short straw.
All right.
Thank you, Trustee Kammer. No, it's been 5 years since we've last raised water sewer rates in 2012, and as part of the budget process, and with all the activity going on with the water, this is time we're getting this in here before we into the rest of the budget review. So we have reviewed it based on fund balances. We've been using excess surplus for the last number of years, and we're getting down below our minimums as it shows in the cash projection sheets in the back. So we're looking at 20% for both the water and the sewer rates. Based on a 20% in Cook County, that would be $10.42 increase per month for somebody in Cook County, and in DuPage County it would be $12.19 per month, 10% increase, and that's pretty much on the last chart in the memo if you got that far back. But I'd like to take you to the fund balance projections. That would be the last sheet in the memo. It was my fault that the sewer fund balance projection got mailed out late. There was 2 tabs on the spreadsheet, and I'm sorry about that. But the water fund projections, we're projecting that this year the fund balance in the water fund will be $2,148,000. That's not the fund balance, but the cash balance. Those are, I don't want to get too technical on that, but the cash balance will be $2,148. Our minimum is $1,661,000. That's just the basic minimum of 25% of our operations. And you can see we're projecting to use $481,000 of the surplus in this year. With the increase and with the added engineering and water main replacement program, we're still expecting to use a fund balance of $474,000. That would bring our estimated balance for 2017-18 year, the ending, down to $1,674,000 with this 20% increase, which would be slightly under our minimum. But as part of the 2-3 year process of transitioning to Lake Michigan water, we're going to have to continue increasing rates as we go, as we add more loans, and that's the quick summary of the water fund. The cash spreadsheet that was sent out later in regard to the sewer funds, sewer fund balance is estimated to be $709,000, and that's already $118,000 below our minimum policy as far as 25% of our cash balance. And a lot of that is due to our sewer rehab we've been doing, and that's just been using our cash balance that we've had on hand since we haven't raised the rates. With the 20% increase and with some of the capital, we're projecting that we would still go another $100,000 down. We'd end up with an ending balance of just under $600,000, which would be $258 below our minimum. It's not good to be below the minimum. I think that we're eventually going to have to get that back up to where we're up to 25% of our fund balance, but this is where 20% would bring us. The spread, I know there's interest in the spread between Cook County and DuPage County. The way that the revenue falls with the different rates and the different residents, we have roughly 39% of our residents are in Cook County, 61% in DuPage County, and then we only have one resident in Kane County right now, so that's less than 1%. And as far as the revenue split, though, 29% of the revenue comes from Cook County, 71% DuPage County. That comes to $1,073,000 from Cook with the 20% increase, and $2,665,000 is what we'd estimate from DuPage County. So that's the quick overview.
Well, I think one of the headlines, even with this 20% increase, when you look at our comparisons of our rates with our neighbors, currently we're in the low bracket. You probably saw that in the chart that was sent out. Even with the 20% increase, it bumps us up to the middle. We're not skyrocketing up to the top of our rates because our neighbors have been raising their rates. They haven't had that 5-year gap. So it really kind of puts us back into the middle of the pack. And Dan, if you wanted to talk about how that breaks out.
Pretty much, as you know, as we have a lot of capital improvements with the DuPage and on the capital side on the sewer at the Devon excess flow facility, capital associated with that violation, EPA violation, and then bittersweet improvements that we need to do down there. As I think Todd and Paul have said, that this is kind of a phase one of increases. If you remember back in the presentations on the whole DuPage water, ultimately that rate is going to go up, but we're trying to time it when we actually get the water, which is our goal is to get it in 2019. So we're proposing right now a rate increase to this is more of an operational, get our operations and some of the capital engineering that's involved with both water and sewer. Next year we'll be we'll know construction-wise and loan-wise on the DuPage water. We'll be getting the engineering done now. So we'll be able to nail those numbers down a lot better, and hopefully we'll be securing those low-interest loans with the EPA during this next year as well. So we'll have a better idea of where those rates need to get to. And then the discussion will be is how quickly do you want to, raise, 20% is a significant increase. You can try to spread that out over multiple years. You can do it in 2 years. I mean, those are some of the questions that I think ultimately we need to get to. But this one right now kind of kickstarts a lot of the capital that's needed, and then we'll be discussing throughout this next year on what your desire is to hit those, get the rates to where they need to so we can support the loans that will be necessary to pay back.
In terms of the projects that we have factored into that 20%, 70% relates to, on the water end, 70% of that increase relates to the transition to the Lake Michigan water, to getting that engineering put together. And on the sewer side, 58% represents the work that we have to do with the the Devon Avenue facility, putting that up to the EPA standard, and again, the transition to Lake Michigan water. So the majority of those increases are really for those capital projects that we have coming up.
Dan, in the Devon situation, are we in a situation now where we have to leave it open? I thought at some point we were talking about potentially maybe shutting it down for good.
Well, we're still working on that. Right now, we have a permit in the MWRD. If you remember, we have an intergovernmental agreement with MWRD to remove that restrictor that will essentially take all Cook County flow and send it to MWRD. Currently, there's a restrictor. They'll only accept so much, and then it goes to our Devon excess flow facility. In March, they had a requirement we couldn't do it until March 1, and we plan on getting it done, provided we get the permit that first week of March. We already have a contractor lined up. We'll get that restrictor out, and at that point, we believe that our Devon facility should not take any flow. It'll all go to MWRD, but they put a time limit of 3 years on that, which is our time period right now that we've requested with the EPA to be able to go through and figure out what the best solution is to resolve our permit issues at the Devon facility. Number one is going to be the keep that restrictor out and let MWRD take it. They've said no, they won't take it forever. We're hoping that once they start taking it, the flows that we have, the storm, as long as they don't have any issues when they start taking that flow, we're hoping that they'll loosen up on that. And if they don't take all of the flow, maybe that restrictor can grow from an 8-inch up to a 12-inch or something like that, which means less times that we have to run Devon. We've been looking at trying to figure out costs on Devon and Bittersweet, and over the last 7 years, Devon has run on average 21 days a year, which isn't a whole lot, but it, unfortunately, it has to be able to operate and it has to meet that permit when it's called for. Right now, we don't meet that permit. So while we're hoping to work out with MWRD, we're still looking at the other options that are out.
You have a plan A and a B and possibly a C. Good.
And because EPA has a time limit on us to meet that deadline, we have to look at all the options kind of all at once to figure out, okay, because we're still waiting for EPA to respond to our request to modify our permit, which would remove the limits, at least temporarily, remove the limits that are currently putting us in violation. But the U.S. EPA and the IEPA have been going back and forth on what those limits are. Right now, what we're hearing is that future NPDES permits will not have those limits in there. We already have our permits, so we've appealed and said, well, we asked to, if you're not going to put it on future permits, then it should be removed from our permit.
Okay.
So we're waiting for a response on that still.
Good. Thank you.
Was there ever a time where MWRD took 100% of the flow from Cook County residents?
Under normal occurrences, they are taking 100% flow.
Yeah, but
It's only such time when we get a rain event that surcharge happens and the restrictor can't take all that flow, that Devon gets activated.
I'm talking about 30 years ago.
Oh, I believe, my understanding is back in,
Where's Kester?
when the
when you
plant
need
was
him?
built in 1920s, it actually was MWRD's facility. Then when Bittersweet was built, there was a transition where MWRD basically sold it to Bartlett at that point.
What was
and
what was the point of us acquiring something that's going to need ongoing maintenance?
You're asking him a question about something that happened 30 years ago.
No, what?
Longer than that. At the time, the village needed that. They needed it because there's an agreement with MWRD that they're only taking so much flow. So we had to have some type of treatment facility to take anything above and beyond that. So that was the solution back at that time that was agreed upon, and there's an agreement from that. So long term, if we can keep that restrictor out or increase that restrictor, hopefully we can avoid having to do anything at Devon.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, Hanover Park, I don't think they have an excess flow facility. Streamwood doesn't have an excess flow facility. And we bought an excess flow facility from a taxing district to take excess flow, and now we have to maintain it. I'm just trying to understand. That's all.
Right. It's a very...
These other communities don't have to pay for excess flow, but...
They are restricted. From what I've heard from both communities and from MWRD, they are restricted based on they have lift stations that pump to the MWRD facility. They're restricted by those pump stations. So if those pump stations can't pump, they can only pump so much. And what they're basically doing is they're using their sanitary sewers as storage, which could be dangerous because if you get too much, then you're talking about sewer backups. Where we've got an excess flow facility that when that happens, it goes to the treatment plant to help hopefully avoid any type of sewer backup. So it's a different way of doing it. I don't know the whole history of how we ended up with this facility, but I've seen the agreement. I think it was 1971, I think is when 172, where that deal was done between MWRD and the village at the time. So, and that's Bartlett, or the Bittersweet plant was built during that time period, shortly thereafter. So.
I know at a few other board or committee meetings, we talked about a rate study Is that still something that staff has been kicking around?
You know, Dan was able to find this week the original study that Pavia Marting did, and has been kind of pulling through our budget to see if that study is actually still valid. Do the numbers kind of line up? He's just started that analysis, and when we have that, we'll give that to you. And then from there, we can go on to the discussion if it is something that the board wants to pursue, a new rate study.
When was that rate study done?
The report I found is from 94, so
94?
it's dated. As Paul said, I'm basically taking the sewer budget and trying to break out what would go to Bittersweet, what would go to MWRD, you know, Cook County, DuPage County, and that type of thing. We kind of looked at a real rough draft earlier today. Hopefully we'll have that shortly, and then we can send it out to everybody and to get an idea. But they have in their report, Pavia Marting has a breakdown of, you know, they kind of came up with their reasoning of, I think it's like 27.5% of Cook County collection system, 27.5% on DuPage collection system, and the rest went to the wastewater, Bittersweet wastewater treatment plant. They contemplate Kane County being in, and that it needs to be looked at that point, and we have our first residents there, so that's another factor. So at some point, a sewer study that would really get into that probably would make some sense.
Is Pavia Marting still an engineering firm?
They're no longer around. So, but there's plenty of consultants that would be able to do a sewer study.
I was just curious if we could pick their brain. Are the people that did it still living?
I believe so. Yes. I know Junior is actually working for another consultant right now. So
Yeah.
I do know that.
It was done quite some time ago.
Okay, that being said, which way are we sending this then?
Budget review, how to work these numbers into the proposed budget that you'll start reviewing shortly.
All right, I leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. President. That's all we have under public
Chairman
works.
Kammer, at this point, we will be adjourning to executive session. So I will entertain a motion, or actually, roll call to go into executive session. Now, if the clerk can please call the roll so we can adjourn to executive session.
Need a motion.
A motion for executive session.
So moved. That motion should reflect that it's pursuant to Section 2C1 of the Open Meetings Act.
Okay. Motion by Trustee Carbonaro, seconded by Trustee Kammer. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Ahrens?
Yes.
Camera?
Yes.
Carbonaro?
Yes.
Daney?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ranky?
Yes.
We're adjourned to executive session.
Hey, baby. Sorry you didn't win.